You're way down south, and it's May. You need a heater on today?
It's pretty cold in here. I don't know. I haven't been outside.
Weird.
It could be that someone had the cool air too low.
Broken angels.
So I just was sitting here and my feet were cold, so I turned the heater on for about 3 minutes.
Sounds good.
I got this room stays cold, and I don't know why. So I keep a heater right at my feet.
Quick question for you. For my work, just kicked off a big annual fundraising drive, and I'm doing a personal version of the fundraiser.
Sweet.
It's pretty far off topic, but would you mind if I mentioned it on the cast?
Not at all. Not at all. Feel free.
And could you at some point on an MCU cast, I don't know if you've already done this, but would you mind just giving a quick plug to the Picard episode you did?
Oh, yeah, we did.
Awesome.
On the MCU cast. We haven't done it on the MCU. Well, maybe we did. I can't remember. We did the MCU. We recorded MCU last night, and I can't remember if we mentioned it. We definitely mentioned it on the Star Trek cast.
Oh, nice. There's a new Star Trek up. Okay, that's perfect.
Yeah, I think it just went up yesterday.
Cool.
But that's the most likely group of folks that are going to want to hear it anyway. We are live, by the way.
Okay. Let me just make sure I have my thing up so I can give people the information. Hello out to the great wide world.
Hey, everybody. Anybody in them rooms, in them chat rooms? Talk to me. Talk to me, everybody. I feel lonely.
Okay, please write in if you're creeped out.
What's so creepy about this voice?
Well, listen, my friend. If we're gonna get into southern draws and stuff like that, I mean, I know you're all from the east side, east coast area, but my family's all from Texas, and we have a little more of a slow draw.
Mm-hmm.
You think we can do the whole episode like this?
Yeah, man. I don't think anyone would be annoyed at that.
Yeah. This week on Bingers Assemble, we're talking about Altered Carbon. Some good old boys getting down with Kel Falconer and taking on the Angel Fire and all sorts of good things. No, that's not going to work.
I didn't mind it. What's hard for me, like I'm doing this sort of more, I don't know, faster and sort of higher pitch draw. But when you speak, I just want to immediately go to whatever you're doing. Like
you want to get down into the Texas draw.
I want to get that slower Texas thing going.
Yeah.
Like I just want to mock. I just want to imitate whatever I hear. That's I don't know that's a very common thing. I think like everybody has that issue with their like. Especially like you ever, I don't know. You're from Texas? Is that right? Did you say that? Or your family is?
My grandparents are from there.
Grandparents. Do you have an accent with them whenever you talk to them at all?
No. I mean, if I ever had an accent, I had a bit of a New York accent, and I've mostly purged that from myself. What I do have, I'm wondering if you have the same thing, is like I went to Ireland for a year, and when I came back, I'd learned a whole bunch of songs, and it's very hard for me not to sing those songs in the accent I learned them in.
Oh yeah, that's
like
neat.
In the same way, saying the words like, "I don't care if Monday's blue, Tuesday's great." That doesn't make any sense to me. Like, "I don't care if Monday's blue, Friday I'm in love." Like I can't help if I sing that song karaoke and I can't help but doing it in a British accent. Like
yeah, well yeah, and I think singing in general, like you tend to mimic. I keep wanting to say mock, and mock is not the word I'm looking for. Mimic whatever the thing is that you're, whatever the original voice you know it in as. But yeah, I don't know. Whenever I talk to my parents or like my dad particularly, I don't know. I guess both my parents. I mean, I'm not saying I have no accent, but whenever I talk to them, I talked to my brother yesterday, and me and him both just evolved until it's like something about talking to family. You go back to old. So I just really get really southern when I talk to my family.
I can see that. I mean, every now and then I hear that drawl come out with you, especially when you're on an MCU cast and you're tired.
Oh, I bet. Which is often on MCU cast. I'm trying to figure out how to like. We always start that show thinking it's going to be 45 minutes because we have this kind of rule, especially if we're going to charge our patrons for an episode. We want to make it at least 45 minutes long because it just feels, it feels like you want to provide the right amount of value for people who are like, paying you to, if we do a 15-minute episode, I feel like we're gypping our like people.
Gypping's not a word you should use, but
that's right. That's right. Yeah, gypping is no longer good. I don't think I've used that word in like 15 years.
20 years,
so
probably,
yeah, like It's not a word I commonly use. So when I said, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. That's a word that we're not allowed to use anymore. Never used it much, but apparently, apparently it's still back there somewhere. Whatever other word I can use there.
Cheated.
Yeah. I've been. Yeah, I don't remember what we're talking about. Anyway, we can go live whenever.
Yeah,
we are live.
You should use that little outtake of my accent at the end of this, and you'll hear the only time I really get an accent when I'm around my Jewish family from New York when you come to the wedding. So you'll hear that then. All right, let's get started.
Yep, just hitting record on this end. Check. I'm recording. I think, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh wait, what was the exact name of the episode? Fallen Angels, Angel Tears, Broken Angels. Today on Bingers Assemble, we are talking about the final episode, episode 8 of season 2, Broken Angels of Altered Carbon. We're wrapping all the stories up. We're talking about Kovac on Kovac action. We're talking about what happens to the Angel Fire. We're talking about how do we feel about ending the series. Well, hopefully there's going to be a season 3. But what it all means is who's actually in that last stack. All this and more after a commercial ad we have no control over.
Welcome to Bingers Assemble. My name's Matthew Carroll.
I'm Matthew S. Fox.
All right, let's talk about this episode of Altered Carbon. For those of you listening to this in the distant future, or who have watched it in the distant past, this is the final episode of season 2, where really everything comes to a head. We get the Elder is on the loose in Jaeger's body and trying to destroy everything, the entire city, and Danica teams up with our heroes to try to stop it, but then double crosses them, and yeah, that's the thrust of the episode. She doesn't last long, and then then they all fight, and then finally Kovac sacrifices himself to save Kel and kind of save himself from the past, his other version, Kovac Prime. So that's the episode, and everyone seems to be restored at the end. So kind of death doesn't matter a situation.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about it later, but we should just say as part of the plot summary, the big reveal at the end is Dig is kind of mooning around talking about how much she misses Poe. Poe comes back. He doesn't really remember her, but it seems like he can be taught to remember her. They have a really nice sort of loving moment. And then they find out that he's carrying with him a code that is like an access code to a DHF that's stored somewhere. And they use it to create a stack. And we sort of get this like computer view going deep into the stack and then roll credits without ever officially telling us who's in the stack. So
yeah, you know what I thought we were going to get when it zoomed in on that stack? Really slowly on the blue stack, I thought we were just going to get like a hint of red.
Yeah.
Like as if the Elder was also saved in there.
That I think would have been a lot better than what I think we're going to get. But let's get to that. So what's your overall take on the episode, especially in this wrapping up the season for us?
Overall, I think the episode's great. It's really, really wonderful. It's rare to me that it's rare that an ensemble show does a really great job with the final episode. And I feel like every character in this got their due, and every character got paid off well, and the overarching story was told well. I did feel like it was a little cluttered, but I never felt that in any given moment. But looking back at what happened in the final episode, it feels like so much happened in the final episode. But it's a finale, you know. I think it needed to, and so many beautiful, memorable moments and memorable lines. Like the dialogue in this episode was written just exceptionally well. Everyone's dialogue is really wonderful. What did you think?
Yeah, I'm the same way. I was very happy with this episode. I thought it gave a very satisfying conclusion to the season. I like you. I think it was a little cluttered. I think there's one or two plot lines that I wished had gotten fleshed out more. It again brought me back to my there's a part of me that thinks, a lot of shows could probably be 8 episodes instead of 10 or 13. This one I felt maybe could have been 10 episodes as well. That's, I think, part of why it felt a little rushed, or it could have just sped up the first couple episodes. But yeah, overall, I felt like, with the one glaring exception that we'll get to, of that very end, I felt very satisfied with everything here. I thought the Danica payoff was really nice. We got the Elder storyline that I didn't want, which I was frustrated by. But again, it's sort of like I was so sure that was going to happen going in that I think I was over my disappointment about that, and I feel like they made that choice, and for making that choice, they told a really good episode. I
was a little annoyed at our heroes for when Danica double crosses, because the Elder had basically decided not to destroy the people. The Elder was the Elder was not a mustache twirler. The Elder realized what the people that people could be saved or whatever, and decided not to kill everyone. Turned off the big machine, and then Danica double crossed the Elder, and then the Elder immediately kills Danica. And I was like, oh, okay, well, now our heroes can try to have that conversation again. And I mean, maybe it'll be harder, but they can at least try to convince the Elder.
Yeah.
And they did not. They just immediately went into fighting. And I was like, why aren't we having a conversation here? Why aren't we saying Danica does not represent, the actions of Danica do not represent the actions of all humankind?
Well, so let's get into that. Let's just actually start with Danica and Harlan, because we've been wondering all along, and it turns out, like, we had a lot of theories about where Harlan was, and it turned out, like, yeah, they didn't really use that actor much. Harlan was just dead in a cabinet the whole time.
Yeah. And not so much because of the actor. Like, I wouldn't have minded seeing him more, but I do feel like that was a wasted opportunity. I would have liked to have seen something more twisty. And I know it's my idea, so I'm a little hung up on it. But like, it would have, like, when she pulls that gun and when she hands the DHF to the Elder and then pulls the gun and fires, it would have been a great moment if, like, she said, that's not Harlan's stack, I am Harlan. Like, that would have been such a great moment. Instead, it was kind of like, yeah, whatever. Danica just killed her father. It didn't feel that surprising to me.
Yeah. I wanted that storyline to be a lot more, but I thought it was a night. It made Danica's actions this entire season made sense. The idea that it was a coup, and again, kind of a nice play on the storyline from season 1, because it's the same issue of, like, a child who has nowhere to go when the parent is never going away. It does also occur. Do we know? Are we confirmed that there's going to be a season 3?
I don't know. I can look it up real quick.
Okay.
If there's any information about that. This season just came out, so I don't know if we're like not that late on covering this season.
Okay. So it may well be that then no one has any idea, especially because of the COVID situation. But I guess because where I was going with that is, it does seem like they did a couple of things to leave it open, though, because they gave us absolutely no confirmation except Danica's own word that is Harlan on that stack that was broken. So it is entirely possible that either Danica was wrong or Danica was lying, and that Harlan is still out there somewhere.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that exact thing, that we only had her word for it, and then we were going to find out it was actually Danica's stack or something like that.
Right.
That's what I was kind of looking for. But yeah, agreed. He definitely could show up again.
I kind of like, now that they've committed to that, I want them to kind of stick to that. But I do think that they left it open, especially, and I think this is a crazy idea, and I'm sure you're about to tell me some part of the episode that I'm forgetting that proves this can't be true.
Mm-hmm.
But what if it's Harlan on that stack they spun up?
It's possible. I don't see why Poe would save Harlan's stack.
I mean, the whole idea, I think, is that it's supposed to be that it's the non-prime version of Kovacs, right? Is on that stack?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's no way it's not. I feel like that's 100%. But yeah, I mean, obviously there's a way. It's just I don't see why else.
I don't want it to be that for all sorts of reasons, but I feel like if it's not, one thing that it could be if it's not that is Harlan. Like somewhere where Poe got confused or got double crossed as well.
Yeah, the only it's tough because I do want Kovacs back. I love the story of the Last Envoy, and when he made the sacrifice play at the end and dies, I was very sad because I really didn't want his story to end. And yes, Kel has been involved since the beginning, and so if we went on to season 3 following Kel, that would be okay with me. I'd still be on board, but I would miss Kovac, you know?
Oh, but see, I think we are going to get Kovac. We have Kovac Prime.
Sure, but he's not the character we've been following for 2 seasons. He'd be the character we started season 1 with, or actually even further back than that. So it's not that we wouldn't get Kovac, but we wouldn't have the like hardened, grizzled guy who dealt with Bancroft and the people the guy who knows Poe and knows Lizzie and knows
I guess I'm finding like I don't miss that as much, in part because I never really was able. Anthony Mackie always felt like a new character, not like the same Kovac, because the reason we discussed in earlier episodes. But more for me more than anything, it's the same. Like the thing I know that you guys talk about on the MCU cast all the time. I want death to have consequences, and I know that that's kind of a ridiculous statement in this show, because the whole point of this show is that death doesn't have consequences.
Yeah, you want his sacrifice to have matter.
Is that like therefore like if you destroy the stack, that has consequences.
Right. Unless you're backed up. I mean, this is very much within the world and within the possibilities of the world. And I'm glad they did it here. If they're going to bring him back, I'm glad they did it right away and not like next season or something. They just start the season off with, oh, by the way, Poe saved his stack. Like, this is clearly the intent of the writers. Even before Poe is... Like, I kind of knew this was coming because Poe, as he's disappearing, he says, not yet... And then he writes a Post-it note and sticks it in his pocket, and I was like, "That's he's doing something to help Kovac." Like I could just, especially as soon as Kovac died, I was like, "That's what that Post-it was about." Like so I saw that. I guess I wasn't. What is that? Sorry, I'm gonna stop that noise from continually happening. I don't know. I gotta apparently have a window open somewhere that is doing the Facebook bleep noise. It's Alyssa. Okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I guess for me though, it's I think within the story that would make total sense, and I think that's certainly a possibility. I think it's that they told the story in such a way that you were supposed to, as the audience, feel the emotional weight of his dying. And
agreed.
I just, as a general rule, I feel like giving us that feeling, giving us that moment, and then snatching it away and saying, "Oh, by the way, don't worry, he's not dead." It just I hate that. I feel like it's such bad writing, especially because what it means is if there ever is actually another chance where Kovac might actually die, I don't feel like I'm going to feel anything for it, because I'm like, come on, writers, I'm not falling for this trick again.
Yeah. I'm totally with you on that.
I love the character of Tony Stark, and I feel like his skip ahead 30 seconds if you haven't seen Avengers Endgame. His death at the end of Avengers Endgame is incredibly powerful once I really was able to feel it. But at first I didn't feel it, because I remembered him having the exact same moment at the end of the first Avengers movie, but then, nope, it's okay, he still lives. And I'm still upset about that, because that kind of like false death, I just feel like it cheapens the whole story. And to take us on that moment, to have us watch Kel have all that pain, and to for them to direct it and do music and everything in a way that's saying, like, we want you to have the audience to experience the idea of Kovac being final dead. I want that to have consequences.
I'm with you in general. It's hard for me as a fan of these types of shows. Like you mentioned Tony Stark or any of the characters who have died in the Marvel Cinematic Universe or any other universe, really. There's this tension for me where it's like, yes, I want death to matter, and I do for sure, but I also really love those characters and want more from them. So like there's a bit of a tension, and it's the same thing here. Like if they do something in the MCU, like bring Tony in as an AI or whatever, that would be, it's different because it's not the same character or whatever. Or if they brought him from a parallel universe or somehow. Right. The thing I think death, bringing a character back in some way that doesn't actually negate the sacrifice of the character that sacrificed. Like bringing from an alternate universe or an AI, I feel like is better for me than something like this where it just seems like he was stored. The one thing we don't know is when he was stored.
That's fair.
So we don't know the consequences of this yet. We also don't know the consequences of the Elder being inside of him. There could be some consequences. I don't mind these types of rewriting of death as long as there's some type of consequences to the sacrifice that the character made.
Yeah.
This could be Kovac from when he signed up to live in the hotel. Maybe they make him a backup. Maybe that's a service they provide when you become a hotel guest, and maybe Poe had it from the very beginning of season 1, and suddenly he loses all his memories, and we have to deal with that. I don't know. I'm with you. I don't like the idea of death not mattering, but I also was very sad to see him go because I really like the character.
Yeah,
and I wanted more from the character.
I think I'm really liking the character of Kovac Prime, and so I think for me that's the like. I feel like it's been interesting. Like we had our original Kovac, and then we kind of went forward to this new Kovac. And if the idea is that like every season there's going to be a new actor who plays Kovac, to me the idea of going a step back and going back to Kovac Prime, I really like that idea. And I'm wondering if there is still a way to play with it. Like if maybe they could do something like that. The stack is not complete, but they can use it to kind of download those memories and those experiences into Kovac Prime. Some way of doing it like that. I think that would be a lot more interesting to me. And it also brings up the other thing where like I guess it makes sense in the story, and maybe it's because they want this again to be one of the main tensions of the next season, if there is one. I really expected Kovac Prime and Falconer to kind of be running off into the sunset together. And I'm glad they didn't set it up as a dumb love triangle thing. I remember at one point I commented like that the first time she interacts with both of them, I was sort of like, oh, love triangle coming up. And like, I really didn't want to see, like, I think we had a little bit of like Mackie being jealous of the other one.
For sure.
I was like, I don't want this to be a, like, she has to choose one or the other. I do think though that a whole bunch of fan fiction about the two Kovacs enjoying someone together have been launched by that one scene. I'm quite certain that that's a thing now.
Or even better, I'd love to see. I bet there's fan art out there with all three of the main Kovacs. Last season, this season.
And I will say, I'm bouncing around here a little bit, but at one point, as we were getting into the fight with the Colonel, Jaeger, I said to you, I think we're going to get him fighting the two Kovacs at once. And we only had that for a little bit, but it was so satisfying when it happened, because these are two men, two versions of the same man, but for all intents and purposes, two different people who have both had their lives so broken by Jaeger, and who Jaeger, on some level, fundamentally doesn't understand. He still thinks that he loved these kids, and he doesn't understand why they're mad at him. And so I just, for the few seconds we had of that three-way fight, I found that so satisfying.
Yeah, the one thing I didn't like about the way it ended, I don't feel like we got much resolution there. And I feel like one way they could have gotten resolution is if they'd had more of a back and forth, more of a conversation during that fight with the actual Jaeger, and maybe when he says you can't pull the trigger and he says no but you can, but then it's still him pulling Jaeger's finger back, which to me the sleeve would probably prevent that, right? Like that seemed.
I had the sense that on some level Jaeger was letting him do it.
Right, like that's what I wanted. I wanted him to be like, no, but you can, and then give full control of the gun to Jaeger and let him do it. Like that would have looked a lot better for me, instead of. I think that's what you have to assume, because otherwise the technology just doesn't make sense. But in the way they filmed it, it's his finger pulling Jaeger's finger to pull the trigger, which I really just was like, that's confusing and weird. You should have. Yeah. And it's less characterization than if he'd said, if he'd realized all of his sins, but he wants both Kovacs to like respect him in some way, so he's willing to make a sacrifice in this last moment as the protectorate soldier that he is to save people. And that would have been like a nice end for Jaeger, not full redemption, but like fitting for his character at least. Instead,
on some levels, I don't feel like for him it would be about saving people. I think for him it would be like some recognition of he did not do right by his son.
Yes.
And that this way he can.
Agreed.
You know, and you're right. I kind of feel like this show is like headcanon.tv. You know, like there's so many times where I feel like the show is saying, here's A and here's C. And you can probably come up with a good reason why we got from A to C. And we're going to try to lead you there. And for me, they're doing it so naturally that it feels kind of easy for me to fill that in without even realizing it.
Right.
But I think you're right. In a lot of these cases, like, to me, I watch that show and I feel like Yeager did to some extent like recognize that, but it didn't happen on screen. You know, it all happened in these like brief shots, and maybe that happened and maybe it didn't. And I love that the show is subtle in some ways, but I feel like there's a lot of headcanoning happening because the show didn't take the time to spell that out a little more. Because you're right. I think like having a longer three-way fight and a longer sort of verbal confrontation between the three of them, I think would have been really powerful.
Or some, you know, verbal conversations that led to that. Or maybe like, you know, the Yeager that or the Kovacs Prime asking him to do it or something like that. Like something that like gives him more of a reason, because the guy who is in that stack just said, you still can't fire that gun, which is almost like taunty. Like it feels like you're taunting him still, like you're still on the other side. And then he says, but I can. It felt more like an action hero trick than a character moment. And so that bothers me.
You know what I would have loved, even if we didn't get the thing with the Colonel, I felt like the transition to Kovacs Prime being on their side was a little bit sudden, and I wanted more of that. Like I loved the scene of Trep.
Yep.
Okay. Edit that out.
Yeah.
I loved the scene of Trep like confronting Kovacs Prime about what happened to her dad. Although I wish he never actually told her, which bothered me. But I would have loved.
Oh, he did, didn't he?
Maybe he implied it. I don't think he did. But
I felt like he pretty strongly implied it. He said, "Your father died bravely."
Oh, okay, yeah, you're right. Okay, but yeah, so even more so than like that was a very cathartic scene. But I would have loved a moment of Kovacs and Kovacs Prime talking, and maybe even like the thing that allows them to kind of let down their walls with each other and connect is them both talking about like being fucked over by the Colonel.
Right.
I think it also would have added a lot to that scene of the two of them fighting the Colonel, fighting Yeager together.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I don't think that Kovacs Prime ever really expressed his wanting to follow Kel and his kind of affection for Kel. He even expressed like willingness to die because Kel didn't want to be with him. Which is pretty emo. But like all of that being said, he never really expressed anything that he did any like distaste for Yeager, which I didn't like. I know he fights him at the end, but he also fights he's fighting the Elder, really.
I disagree there because I think in the last episode, or maybe it was 2 episodes ago.
Am I forgetting something?
When Yeager and Kovacs Prime are walking through the forest of that of the construct, and Kovacs is pretty clear in like thinking, you know, where he says like, you know, well, you know, you promised to take care of Ray and you didn't, and you know, and Yeager points to something about like, but you were so devoted. I don't know how that could have happened to you. And he said, well, you know, you just took me when I was a boy. I want to go back and watch that scene. So I don't remember the exact words, but I definitely get a sense of like he was challenging Yeager and really sort of, you know, calling Yeager out for not treating him properly.
Yeah, I remember that scene, but it was also Yeager was saying that like he did help Ray later. You know what I'm saying? Like he helped her after. He had that whole thing where he wanted to help Ray after Kovacs' death, or after it was at the Battle of Stronghold. He helps Ray download her DHF, and that was his like what he thinks of as his redemption. In the eyes of what he thinks that Kovacs will think is his redemption, and I don't really. I may be just forgetting stuff. That episode I didn't get as wholly as I wanted to, so I may have to go back and rewatch that because I just didn't. I never got the sense of that he was fully ready to, like, if this had been Jaeger he was fighting and not a elder-filled Jaeger, I didn't get the sense that he was as on board with taking down Jaeger.
Yeah. Yeah. It's again, it's one of those things where like we got these little hints and bits, and it's hard to know like how much are you filling in or how much of the show is subtly implying something.
Yeah, and we watched it fast, but we we watched the show over the course of a month and a half or whatever. So
a week, 2 weeks.
Yeah. So I still I'm like, what happened?
I will also say, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hello.
I will also say you talked about Kovac Prime being kind of emo. I felt like we got emo from both of them because the scene of Falconer basically telling the other Kovac like that she's planning to die to save things, and he is so bothered by it. Like, I mean, that was a heart-wrenching, very powerful emotional scene.
For sure.
But there's one line that he said that I hated, but I also realized like that's what he would say because it's so selfish, but that is him to some extent. Where he said like, but you don't love me enough to want to live.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just I have a lot of thoughts about that are kind of wrapped up with any kind of idea of sacrifice or things like that. But I think there's this really like pretty awful way of thinking that can tell you like, that a person should not want to make a sacrifice or not want to do anything else based on your need to have them in your life. And I
don't think that's what he's saying. I think he wishes she had a need to have. He's saying he wished she had the same need to have him that he has the need to have her.
But I think that so cheapens her feel. I think that is such a manipulative, like unfair statement because I don't think in any way, I don't think she loves him any less. I think that's part of the point is that no matter how much she ever loved him, she would still feel like she needs to make the sacrifice.
I don't agree. I think that's the point. I agree. She's valuing the sacrifice and her duty over her over the value that she places on the relationship, which is absolutely fair, but it's not his value. Like he would rather, I think in this moment, I don't know that he'd make this decision. He would not be a good hero if he made this decision. But I think in this moment, he's trying to convince her, like, I would rather let this world burn if we can run together. You know what I mean? Like he's having a moment of like, I wish you wanted to be with me, and that's how badly I want to be with you. I've chased you for 300 years, and I just got you back, and your first idea is how you can sacrifice yourself. And I don't want that.
That's what I meant when I said, like, at first I was annoyed at the writing, and then I realized, no, that's exactly what Kovac would say, know, because you're right. It's not a heroic act. It's a selfish act, but and I'm not judging him for that, but it's a really nice contrast, I think, of showing why, like, Falconer is a hero and Kovac is an anti-hero. And he's a fantastic protagonist, but he's not a hero. He is someone who feels like this is what I want, this personal love. And I just thought that it was such a great scene, but it also like it to me was just one more very emo moment from Kovac of like,
oh, that scene is emo for sure.
Yeah, he sees it still in terms of like how does it affect him,
Yeah, and she is. They're both so true to their characters in that moment. And she says, "You're a crack in my armor." She's all about not letting her sleeve control her is something she said a lot. But I think she's also about not letting her own emotions affect her mission. That's just who she is. That's who Kel is. But she says, "I risk the subtle worlds to touch you again." Yeah. And like I can't let that happen again.
Yeah, no, and I get that, and I think, and so much of that is. Again, I really keep wishing we got more of her backstory because we've just gotten the faintest idea, but this concept of her as someone who that she on some level is responsible for all of this, for having, and I want to know more of that story because I feel like that makes so much sense of like why she would have all this guilt and why she would feel like she can't allow herself to have those feelings for someone else because it's gonna stop her from this mission that she has.
Yeah, and I love. Oh man, one of my favorite lines in the episode. There's so many great lines in this. I was like furiously typing throughout this episode because I had so many things I wanted to bring back up. I loved when he says, you all you wanted to do was see the stars because she created stacks, and he says all you wanted to do was see the stars, and she says, we are more than the sum of our intentions.
Yeah.
It's just so good.
Yeah.
So good.
It was. Well, and that's what it brings up for me. And again, this is not complaining. It's just more like the kind of backstory that I wish we would get at some point. She creates the stacks, right? She figures out this technology, and this technology is found on this planet originally.
I don't know that that's true for sure. We know the alloy comes from this. The main source of the alloy they use in stack technology is found on this planet, but we don't know that they already had found that alloy elsewhere, and that we're already in production. This planet is a key producer of the resources needed for stack technology. It's not necessarily the first place they ever discovered it.
Okay.
We had that discussion on a previous
because of the existence of the orbital and the last living elders, I thought that this was supposed to be like the Elder homeworld, and it might well still be, and you might be right that they still found the elders on different planets. But where I was going with that is, like, I would have loved to have learned that, like, in some ways Falconer was also connected to the founders, like that she was maybe not one of the powerful people, but that she was also on that first mission.
Yeah, that would have been a twist if she had walked out of that cave. Maybe even just like had found them after they destroyed the nursery, and that would like what propelled her to fight it. Because that's the thing, they do say that, like they say it in like the first episode, something like 80% of the alloy is shipped from this planet or something like that. So It's very possible they found other elders out in the galaxy, used the technology, began using the technology, and then they actually may have traced the elders back to here where they maybe came from.
That would certainly track. Yeah. So then it doesn't make sense to not have that. There's certainly many possible origin points for her, but that would have been a cool one.
Yeah, I agree.
So it was one of my favorites too, but I know you were such a big proponent of it. What's your take on the how we wrap up Dig and Poe?
Oh, there's so much to say about Dig and Poe this episode. It's just so beautiful. I love their story. I want more of it. I want to like just Nevermore a Nevermore show. Is that the name of the hotel? The Raven was the first season, and this one's the Nevermore. Oh man, I want all of their story. I just love them. And so many beautiful lines, and connecting Poe's story to Kovach's story. He says, looks like it's just you, me, you, and misery, which I loved that line.
Yeah.
He says, I will not squander what time I have left, and as your friend, I entreat you not to squander yours.
Yeah. We talked about how frustrated we were early in the season. By the end of the season, I was so happy with the Poe Kovach relationship, you know?
Me too.
And especially and Poe sacrifices himself for them, so it seems. But I feel like I do believe that's a sacrifice he would make, but also that he always knew there was a way for him to come back. Which I think was also part of why I was kind of thrown by the stack at the very end, because at first I thought it was that Poe had downloaded his own memories.
Oh, so you thought maybe it was him getting to be a human? Like he was actually... Yeah. I mean, I guess that is a possible interpretation.
To me, that's kind of the moment of like, you know, you save all your data on your phone to the cloud before you break your phone and get a new one. Mm-hmm. That's what I thought he was kind of like saving himself to the cloud so that when he respun up after this reboot, he would be back to normal.
Right. Well, I think that is what he did with that Lizzie program, which, man, when he's sitting there by himself and says, Miss Elizabeth, please come back. I was weeping, man. It was
there was a lot of tears.
Tough.
And I just loved having, I guess now we should call her, is it Annabeth or Annabelle?
Annabelle.
First of all, I thought like the two of them connecting over Poe's poetry, and her saying like, you know, that it's so dark and strange, but so is this world.
Mm-hmm.
It was so beautiful.
Yeah.
And so goth.
So goth. This episode's so emo, all over, really just is. All over the place.
Well, and that like I am of the generation that was goth before it was emo, so I'm always gonna be like, no, it's goth, it's not emo.
Right. Sure. Just the whole.
I'm an old man in my old leather boots.
Right. Just embracing like love and death mingled together. Like goth, emo, whatever you want to call it. It's I guess to me it's emo when it crosses the line to where it's like I'm ready to die because I can't have you. But like. Yeah,
but just having her be the narrator of that end part, especially because I didn't grab that it was her voice at very first, and then I picked up, realized who it was, and I was like, oh, this is so perfect.
Yeah. She's the
And
archaeologue, man. Of course she's gonna like tell the story. Or she's the AI for the archaeologues.
and I thought it was such a nice moment of, because we just had like Kovac and Falconer walking away from each other. And I was kind of like, no, I wanted them to be like the cute romantic, like run off into the sunset together. And then when you immediately showed me Poe and Dig, and I was like, oh, okay, nope, it's okay. These are the romantic into the sunset people together. And I liked that, like, again, the super emo, the super sad thing would have been if Poe just had no memory of her and no connection. And so she now had to be the one to be totally in love with him, and he didn't even know who she was. But I liked that they very quickly allowed him to be like, it's the kind of like amnesia moment of, I don't remember my memories with you, but I remember that I'm still in love with you. Like, he clearly is still so happy to see her and so happy that she's going to be a part of him rebuilding, even if he doesn't know why. And that just made it feel so much better. It's like, okay, this is a love story we can tell.
Yeah. I love their love story. At least I'm calling it a love story. Their connection, and him, teaching her to be to care about the world in a way that she hasn't yet. I just enjoyed their whole storyline. I liked it a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did say, I've been talking, and I know you were also interested in the story, but I've been really fascinated with the whole, what I kept referring to as the chess match back and forth between the governor and the colonel, Danica and Jaeger.
Yeah.
And at one point last episode, when he'd kind of really got the upper hand, you said, well, that's checkmate. And today while we were watching, when and granted, it's not now Jaeger, it's the elder, but still it's Jaeger. When she just, still in her hubris, like, doesn't believe the fairy tale, and he just grabs her and does whatever that elder death touch is to kill her. I think I typed back to you, now that's checkmate.
Mm-hmm.
It felt a very fitting. It felt like a very fitting end for Danica, because there was so much hubris, and there was just, on some level, this inability to believe that she didn't have as much power as she thought she did, which I thought was just so fitting for that character and everything that we had learned about her, that it seemed like for that hubris to be what gets her killed seemed very appropriate.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. She thinks she can just take a gun out and kill the elder.
Right.
No, and even if she had been successful in destroying the stack of Jaeger, that elder would have just gone into her. She's kind of dumb. She's not very bright in some of her decisions. It's her hubris, I know. And
yeah, I don't think she's not her being dumb. I think it's just a very understandable, like, how broken she is from how she, it should, to me, it's just like one more consequence of this elder life that Falconer keeps raving against.
Yeah, she says, they tell her, you gift wrapped your dad, and she says, presentation is everything.
Yeah. And I loved that it was also like, it was the elder, but as they established, like, the colonel was in there somewhat too. And so the colonel wanted her dead just as much. And so that moment just felt like a really nice, like, bringing together of those two things.
Yeah. That's true. Man, the standoff with the elder, I loved them trying to convince the elder not to rain down fire. And it was Kel being her like leader, Kel, and stepping forward and saying, take what is offered, let it be enough. Like, that's just such a Kel line.
Yeah, it's like trying to make the elder into an envoy.
Yeah, exactly. She's using her, like, ability to convince people, to try to convince this elder that she has no understanding of, but, like, take what is offered, let it be enough. It's just great. It's just wonderful.
Yeah. It was really good. Yeah, I think just overall, a couple of complaints here and there, but overall, I think a very satisfying end. I think season 1 was better, but I think I did like season 2 quite a bit. One of the things that I realized that I think this is part of why we sort of have shifted the way we're looking at it is season 1 was Kovac was obviously the main character, but the story didn't revolve around him. The story evolved around this plot that he was kind of like the detective, poking his nose into. And he wound up having his own plot, but he felt like he was much more central to the plot, and the plot was really about him. instead of it being about this story that he'd kind of wandered into the middle of, the way it had in season 1. And I feel like that I think I liked to see that season 1 model a little bit more, because I liked learning about him more, a little bit like looking at it from the side instead of just the straight on.
Yeah, I can see that. You had other characters that felt more central last season. This season, everyone seemed to be. It's weird because everyone seemed to be through the lens of Kovacs, but then also Kovacs didn't feel like he had a solid foundation of who he was. And it wasn't until these last 2 episodes where we got those conversations between him and someone he could talk to. We didn't get any of those ghost conversations this season, which is weird because then they called it back at the end of this season with Kel seeing him, but we didn't get any of that, which I thought was a loss, because I would have loved to seen Ortega or as I think you mentioned Riker at one point, like or Vernon or Lizzie. We got that with Poe. We got Poe seeing Lizzie, but we never got we got Poe seeing Lizzie in 3 different incarnations, and we never got to see Kovacs see any of those people. This episode we did have a great conversation with Poe and Kovacs though. We got a great conversation with Kovacs and Kovacs last episode, and this episode we got the wonderful conversation with them sitting and having a drink together.
Yeah,
it was just awesome. So good. We're all broken, Poe. Nothing more human than that, he says.
Yeah, that was such. And I liked how much they're now at this point teaching each other back and forth. Just on what you said before, I think you're right, and I'm realizing the only time we ever saw Riker, it was actually filmed from last season. It was nothing new, which makes me. I think I was trying to say this on one of our other episodes, and I think we got onto a tangent, and I never finished the thought. I love streaming services, but this is the one time when I kind of want to go back and keep buying DVDs of things, because I want to see a commentary track for this show. Especially, I want to hear the actors, but I also want to hear the writers and the directors and the producers talking, because, and maybe they'll never admit it, but I really want to know what's the story with why we have a new actor, because, and maybe I'm reading way too much into things here, I feel like if they had planned all along to have a different actor for season 2, then probably you tell that to the actor for season 1, and maybe you make into his contract, like, but we're still going to bring you back every now and then for like a little bit of a cameo. Is that okay? And the fact that he never comes back in any way, shape, or form as a cameo, to me that says that maybe like things broke off in not a great way with that actor, and that's why like we switched to a new actor. And maybe like the plot made it really possible as well. But I feel like if you were still on good terms with the actor who played Riker, he would have appeared in some way at some point in the season. Yeah,
I would think that, except who would he have appeared to? And I know he could have had himself appear to Kovacs, but Kovacs doesn't really have a strong connection with Riker, the character. He would have had, I guess, his previous self appearing to himself, but we've never seen him do that, and none of the other characters in this story ever met that sleeve. So there's not much of a reason to have him here. It would have been nice to see him. I'm sure that story probably exists somewhere. We would have to do some research and see if there's any kind of articles about. But I think this show came out about a year apart, so it does seem like they didn't have too much derailments in the process. Once that first season was out, they got to work on the second season pretty quick. And I love that they got Anthony Mackie in here. I think he does a great job. They don't give him enough to do in the first few episodes, but he does a great job with what they give him.
Yeah, like we said, I wish had been able to do more to connect him to the original Kovacs, but I definitely, like, after maybe episode 2, I stopped seeing him as Falconer entirely. Like, I was able to just see him stop seeing him as Falcon, not Falconer.
That was a little confusing a few times when we were talking, and you said Falconer, and I was like, you mean Sam Wilson Falcon, or I'm a little lost. Yeah. They do a lot of really good stuff with Kovacs Prime this episode. They say with Kovacs says we'd be safer with a bullet in his head, which is just a great extension of what he thinks of his old self. And she says, "Is that what I should have done to you on that bridge that day?" Which is just a great little ethical question. Clearly not. Clearly that's not what she should have done. Or is it? Because she admits that her love for him is what brought her down, or brought the stronghold down in the end.
And that's such a multi-dimensional issue.
Yeah,
we could spend a whole episode on that.
Yeah, for sure.
I was gonna say I do agree with you that I really like Kovacs Prime, and I feel like that may also be part of why I'm pushing back a little bit on the idea of the Anthony Mackie Kovacs coming back, is because I really want I want more of the story of Kovacs Prime, and maybe in a new season we'll get both of them, and that could be interesting. But I really hope we don't have Kovacs Prime just kind of like right off into the sunset. I feel like his character is a really interesting one that I want to see them keep exploring.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I want it, and I think we will. The way they set it up with, well, like she tells him that they need him on this planet for his information because Harlan's world is such a important world. Although Harlan's world is no longer protected, the Protectorate was having a hard time getting to Harlan's world because of the armed turrets everywhere.
Right.
And those are all gone. So what does that mean for the stack technology? Does it mean there's going to be a run on that alloy now that Harlan may have Danica is dead and maybe the government of Harlan's world has lost control? That's all crazy. So I think we'll get more with him. I think because that the good thing about Kovacs dying and coming back, the trick of that is it got them around the whole double sleeving issue. Because
Right.
everyone believes the last envoy is dead. Everyone believes Kel is dead. Now they can actually, in many ways, this allows them to run off into the sunset together in a future season because now they can arrive as some different characters at some point.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're still going to have the double sleeving issue, but certainly if it's well, let me ask you this: if we get a season 3, would you, and we continue with the original Kovacs or the non-original Kovacs, but our Kovacs,
Right.
would you want Anthony Mackie back, or would you want a new actor? And which do you think is going to happen?
I think it's going to be a new actor. I don't know what I want. I think because these first 2 seasons have established that their different actors are playing him, I think that what they're going to go for, and what's neat about it, is they've got this great show with a good following, and most shows probably could not have scored Anthony Mackie, but with a show where they say, "Hey, we'd like you to come be on this show, but you will not need to do more than 1 season." Like they can get huge stars and like huge.
That's how they got Christopher Eccleston to do the reboot of Doctor Who.
Is it?
Yeah, he did not want to. He did not want to like get sucked into doing a sci-fi character for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
And so he specifically made a contract that they only have him for 1 season.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I didn't know that about Eccleston. I knew that Eccleston didn't want to stick around. I didn't know it was I didn't know he knew that before he started. But yeah. That's like I think what they're going to go with is like each season will be a different actor. I do think that they've now established that Anthony Mackie might show up as Kel's conscience in a way. So
I can see that.
Or he'll get the view of her throughout the rest of the series.
I will say, I think as the dedicated MCU fanboy that you are, I think you might be a little bit overstating Anthony Mackie's place in the universe of stars in Hollywood.
Maybe.
Like, I don't think of him as like, a top draw in quite the same way. I feel like that this is exactly the next right step for him. Like to go from being like a, second billing but important character in the MCU, like the next step for that is to then get your own TV show.
Sure, I agree with that. And but the thing is, he already is this year. He's already got his own TV show with Falcon and Winter Soldier coming out.
Right, but I don't think that was confirmed when he started filming this.
Maybe. I'm not sure. Because that's already filming and such. But yeah, you may be right. But I still think that like any Avenger is a pull. And a show like this that didn't really have any named actors in the first season, the fact that it raised its profile enough and got a named actor for the second season, I don't know. Obviously it works for both of them. Anthony Mackie wanted to do it and they wanted him on it, but almost every other character is like a Netflix level character actor. We got Misty Knight in there. We've got other actors who've been on things like the CW shows with Harlan.
See, I think if you looked outside of, if you asked a whole bunch of people who were not MCU, like people who liked the Marvel movies but were not the sort to maybe sign up for a podcast about it or the like, I mean, even for myself, if I didn't know about this show, if you told me, oh, but Anthony Mackie's the star, that wouldn't make me any more interested in watching it. Like I am a pretty hardcore Marvel fanboy, but I don't think of Falcon as a character that is that important to the story. Like he's the secondary character in
Sure.
a couple of the movies.
Yeah, no, I hear that. He's definitely not a level 1 Avenger. Like, he's not one of the first line, but he's the second line. And like anyone in those Marvel movies, I feel like has raised their profile to a greater level. But yeah, anyway, yeah, that's neither here nor there. I'm no Hollywood expert.
Yeah, neither am I.
Other things about Kovacs Prime I
watched
really
Entourage. That's about all I know.
Other things about Kovacs Prime I really liked. I really liked the scene where he gets to deal with the consequences of Trep's dad's death. And our Kovacs looks at him and says, "You're not used to dealing with these consequences, are you?"
Yeah.
There's also the moment where he's trying to trust Kel blindly, trust Kel's plan, and he's like, "Why are you questioning her? Why don't you trust her?" And he says, "Because she taught me better." You're just trusting her blindly because you're not an envoy. You need a little training.
Well, and this I thought was such a great moment, because I feel like for anybody who has ever spent some time inside your own head, doubting yourself or questioning yourself, or having this kind of like internal fights, one thing you often do is like look back at your past self and be like, my God, what an idiot you were. Why did you choose to do this? Or like, why don't I still have that hope and optimism that my former self had, or whatever that direction it goes.
Right.
And so being able to watch someone actually talk to their past self, and sort of to be able to watch the past self do the thing that you remember you doing, and you can either be like, yeah, why don't I still do that? Or be like, you idiot, why did I/you ever do that? Like, I thought that was just fantastic. And again, so much room to explore there, because it's such a none of us ever actually met that person, but I think most people have probably spent a little time like talking to their past self in their head.
Yeah,
in a metaphorical sense. I don't
for sure.
Like,
well, and that another line that's great for that relationship. Kovacs Prime says, "You think because you've lived longer that makes you wise?" So good, so good. Especially in the light of this world, where we know the Meths, who are the ones who live forever, and they are not wise. They are the opposite. They have fallen to their basest motivations.
Yeah.
That was all great, and I loved how his story connected with Trep's story. She at one point says, "Let them torch the city," because she's so frustrated with when she finds out her father's been killed, and this is even before she knows that Kovacs Prime did it. And then Kovacs Prime in the final battle, he needs to run to save the city, and he's like, "Cover me," or she volunteered. She said, "I'll cover you," and lets him run off, and she stays and fights the battle and lets Kovacs Prime run. And I thought that was just a really nice moment. Really, really nice moment.
We didn't get any. Oh no, actually, I was gonna. No, we did. We did get a nice moment with her, that she's back united with her wife and her kids, and she's still. I think the idea is supposed to be that she took over her father's shop, right?
Yes, which I thought was really neat. I thought that was a neat end for her. She's no longer the bounty hunter. She's got her family back together, and she's now working in her father's shop. That's cute. It makes me want to see a show set on Harlan's world. And I think we may get that. We may find out what happens. Danica tells Kel, "Don't you know the uprising isn't real?" And she says, "It is now." And so this uprising that was started falsely by Danica is now been taken up by the actual Kel, and she left not one but two operatives there on Harlan's world with Trep and with Kovacs Prime and with all of the Kellists who had been following her. Not to mention all the people like that one that said, "Long live Kelkris Falconer." There's all these people that are Kellists at their heart who want to fight the Protectorate.
That is another storyline that I wish we'd gotten a little bit more of. Like, we had all those people who, they turned on Kemp, and then the Protectorate tried to come and stop them, but they were all killed by Angel Fire. And we never heard from those folks again. It would have been nice to have had, and again, I think maybe we just needed like one or two more episodes, but like to have had there be some sort of ongoing contact, so that like, if in some way like the big final battle, that like maybe like Danica has much more of an army there to help her, but they get overwhelmed by this, fake, what she created to be a fake army has now turned into something that is actually her undoing.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so perfect. Yeah, that's a great example. That's a great example of her hubris leading to her own downfall. That's a really consistent arc, and I love it.
Yeah. And we like, to me, I feel like it's the character arc of like, I think that I can control these things so that I can start a dangerous situation because I can always stop it. And the where that arc should go is eventually the situation gets to a point that you can't stop it, and you become the victim of it. You know, and I feel like we did get that from her, but that would have been such a better visceral way to do it, especially because we never saw what happened with those.
Yeah.
I would love a show just set as kind of like a day-to-day on Harlan's world. I'm also I will say I've jumped into a whole bunch of role-playing games, including one actually run by Jeff Randall, also of the MCU cast. He's running a great D&D cast, D&D game. And so my mind is very much in role-playing world, but like, how good would a role-playing game set in the Altered Carbon world be?
It'd be awesome. It'd be absolutely awesome.
Yeah, you could spend character points on like different parts of your stack and stuff like that,
or your
and, like,
sleeve, or
your sleeve, and like jumping around, and
I'm sorry. Can you hold one second?
World.
Can you hold 1 second?
Yeah.
Sorry. So sorry. It's such a rich world. I'll be right back. Sorry about that live stream. Sorry about that, Matthew. You were saying it's such a rich world.
Yeah, it is it's such a rich world. And frankly, like, I feel like this is a world that is just begging for an extended cinematic universe, you know? Because you could keep giving us stories about the what's happening, you know, with our main storyline. But like, you know, you could now have a show about, you know, like you said, about like Trep and like what's happening with her back on Harlan's world, and like it being bits of the main plot, but mostly just being like a day in the life show. We could have more about Riker and Ortega, you know, back where they are, just Ortega, you know, like there's so much to this world that I just would love to see them explore. And I get where they're not going to do it. I don't think Netflix wants to have like 5 shows set in the Altered Carbon world.
I don't know, man. They did Defenders, and I know that's got its like pedigree with Marvel, but still, they did that, and we know they've already got a cartoon or an animated movie set in this universe.
Right.
So even if we just got more animated stuff, that could be neat. Which we're covering next week. I'm excited about that.
And my understanding is, and like, granted, they've never published these numbers, and so no one's gonna know for sure, but that, that overall the Marvel Netflix universe wound up being somewhat of not a bust, but certainly that like it petered out a lot, and the last couple seasons were nowhere near as successful as the first few. So I don't think that Netflix executives are like, oh my God, we need another Defenders right now.
Right.
But certainly it'd be nice to maybe just start with one spinoff, then be able to keep going with it.
Yeah. So there was one last thing I had written down here, and it actually bursts a bit of a bubble. You were saying that might be some other kind of DHF or maybe Pose, but I think there is a line in the show that says pretty clearly that that's Kovacs'. He says, better get the good whiskey ready. Or Dig says, better get the good whiskey ready, which is a reference to that earlier episode where Kovacs and Kovacs Prime come into the room, and he tastes the whiskey and says, that's my favorite.
Oh, yeah.
So
okay.
that's definitely Kovacs'.
I took it from her to be just to like, there's a reason to celebrate.
Right.
But certainly also like, I don't know if if it's going to happen, I think there's a possibility that she doesn't realize who's actually on that stack. But I think certainly at the point at which the story ends, we are supposed to believe that Dig and Poe 100% think that it is Kovacs on that stack.
Yeah, I'm really curious which Kovacs, though, because we don't know when did he have time to back him up and how and all that stuff. It's like, did he do it when he had him down a few episodes ago? Did he do it at the beginning of the first season? We just don't know. We have no idea when he backed up Kovacs. We do have a little feedback.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Sick with it 87. Good to hear from you again, Sick with it. He said a few things here. He said, I think he wanted her to love him enough to love herself to want to live. I think he wanted to love her enough for her to want to live. Yeah, I think that's definitely true.
But I guess I just reject that whole premise because I like
Right.
and granted, this partially comes out of my work like in mental illness stuff, and I've done a lot of work with people who are suicidal and things like that. And I think that often that's the like, why would they commit suicide if they had just loved me more? And that's just that's just not how people think.
Sure, it's also.
I do think it's a really good point. Like I think you're right. That is what he means. You know?
Yeah. For sure. That's all I was getting at. I agree with you that it's not necessarily the healthiest attitude. And it's anytime you look at your relationship and say, why isn't my relationship the most important thing to you? Like, that's not a great thing, but I do think that's how he felt. So he also says, how many times does she have to sacrifice herself for the common good, you know? Which is also a fair thing. Like, that's looking at someone and saying, you give, and like you've given yourself over to this over and over. That's a good perspective on it, a different perspective on it. Like, you give so much, and you're big into the activist world, and you see people all the time. We were talking about it last episode. People give of themselves so much that there's nothing left to give, or they're using up themselves, and they're not taking care of themselves. Part of this it could be him saying, like, why don't you have something for you? Why don't you take something for you? Which is not what she wants. She believes she's kind of driven by guilt here, but also driven by her purpose, and it's her choice. But he doesn't like the choice she's making.
There's two things I'd say. One quick, one longer. The first, just on that idea of burnout, 100%. Like, one of my professors when I went to grad school, I forget the exact wording, but he basically said, like, I would love to see you working hard in a year, but what I most care about is that you're still doing this work in 20 years. Because the rate of people who like go into that world and then leave it within like 5 years is something like 60%. I mean, it's the burnout is high, the work is hard, the hours are long.
The pay isn't always great. So there's a lot of times people can do it when they're young, but then they realize, ooh, I actually do have to support my family now.
Yeah, and I have something actually to say about that at the end of this episode. But the other thing is, I think you exactly nailed it when you said guilt. And it hadn't occurred to me till we were talking about this, but I think, like, more than anything, if we get more of Falconer's story, which I really hope we do, I feel like the eventual end of Falconer's story isn't her bringing back death and fully overthrowing everything. I think she's going to hopefully change things and make them better. But I think the end of her arc is her forgiving herself. Because I feel like you're right. That's her motivation. It's not that she has this, like, we need to change the world because it should be better. I mean, it's part of that. But most of it is, I screwed up and I have to fix this.
Yeah, and that's exactly right.
I feel like so much of it eventually has to be her being able to forgive herself and to say, like, yes, I did this thing. I had no idea what it would lead to. This is not my fault. Or if it is, I've atoned for that. And I get to kind of close that door. Yeah.
What I love about this, we often talk about people not being mustache twirlers and having complex motivations and how that's so much more interesting from a television show. And in many cases, we get these situations where it's clear what's right and wrong, but even between the hero and villain, you know what I mean? It's just so clear. I love a story that's so complex morally that we're having a discussion about the two heroes and their motivations at cross purposes, and we can look at it from different angles and be like, well, is Kel only motivated by guilt? Is that the only reason she's doing this? Is he right to try to convince her off the ledge because she's really just motivated by guilt? Or is he, using this manipulative tactic, and that's not okay? Like, those two things both exist in this scene, and it's beautiful. It's beautifully weaved. I freaking love it.
I think that's such a good way of saying what's the real testament to the show is that at the end of the day, I don't think there's any character who the writers ever said, well, we can't have them do this or that because they're a hero or because they're a villain, so they have to be more heroic or villainous. Like, every character is just a person, and you can see them as a hero or you can see them as a villain, but at the end of the day, like, they're doing the things that are believable and relatable to them. You know, like even someone like Yeager, who is clearly like, I think in many ways, I mean, he literally becomes the big bad at the very end of the show, but he's definitely, him and the governor are like the two big bads of the season. But each of them, I feel like there's not a mustache to be twirled. Like they
No.
both have their own very complex, very relatable ideas and motivations in ways that every now and then you feel a little bit of sympathy for them.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, such a complex story, and I love it.
Yep.
We have a few more things. Stick with it says we may get through as much as we can here. I wonder if the sleeve Falconer is actually her original sleeve. She's been alive a long time. It is not her original sleeve, but she has been a long alive time. She died in the explosion. Her original sleeve was destroyed, and Ray created a clone to torture and left it on ice for 300 years while she tortured it.
Right. But I think this question is going to something deeper, which is, it may have been her sleeve from season 1, but was that her original body? Like, was that the body that the person of Kelchrist Falconer was born into?
Oh, no, it wasn't. Right?
Yeah. Well, if nothing, I'm not sure we've ever had that confirmed, but certainly I feel like if she invented this technology, wouldn't she be the first to use it herself?
Yeah. Also, we got her original name in this episode, which sure she could have just changed her name, but it seems like maybe when she took on the moniker of Kelchrist Falconer, she probably changed. Well, for one thing, no one knew until she told him on that beach that she was the one that created Stax. So I'm assuming when she changed bodies and names that she changed all of that. So I don't think it's her original, but I think his question is.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
I think his question is more about if is this because you said she's been a long alive. She's been alive a long time, which means I think he's saying that those 300 years, that body looks good for 300 years.
Yeah.
He says, I personally love the fact that every season may have a new actor playing the same person in a new sleeve every season. I think that's cool, too. I think that's real cool. He says, yeah, I don't see Anthony Mackie as a grade A star, too, and I'm an MCU fanboy as well.
Yeah.
I think that makes 3 of us.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think he's grade A, but I do think he's. I was impressed with Altered Carbon because I'd never heard, I had never seen it, and I didn't know that it was very successful. And then all of a sudden I heard Anthony Mackie was going to be the star, and I was like, oh, that's neat, that's cool. So it kind of did convince me that like this might be a show worth checking out if it pulled Anthony Mackie on board.
I guess I just feel like it's to me like. Yeah, I could see it pulling you on board, but I don't think Anthony Mackie was slumming it this season.
Right.
I don't
No. I don't think so either.
Like I feel like, if you got like a Chris Hemsworth or someone like that, or like any of the, sort of head, even if someone like
which they just did for a movie, which is kind of neat.
Right. Like, if you got Elizabeth Olsen to do a TV show like this, I'd be like, okay, that's interesting. That's kind of a step down for her. But for me,
I see them as very similar to me. Anthony Mackie and Elizabeth Olsen. I feel like they're like right along the same lines at this point.
See, I think the thing is that Elizabeth Olsen has had some real character arcs. I don't feel like I have, but until this show, I had no idea what kind of an actor Anthony Mackie was, because I don't think I ever saw him have much range. He said some funny lines, and he said some kind of like brotherly things to Cap and to some other soldiers, but I don't think I ever got anything from him that told me like, oh yeah, this guy's a good actor. In a way that I think Elizabeth Olsen, she had much more plots revolve around her.
Gotcha.
We'll see.
Sorry.
Yeah, I certainly think that like the idea of, 20 years ago, stepping down from movies to TV was, you never did that, and certainly I think those days are completely gone.
Right, and I agree. I don't think they're completely gone. There's still that. Apparently, oh gosh, what's his name? The guy who plays Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman, came out and said, "No, I don't want to do a Disney Plus show." He said it with a bunch of disdain, like I'm not gonna. Or no, he said, I think he used it as a verb. He's like, no, they're not gonna Disney Plus me, or something like that. And it was like really insulting to all the actors who are currently doing Disney Plus shows for Marvel.
Like Adam Driver, who's a major star of the Star Wars reboot movies, not reboot movies, but the newest trilogy. Like, he did a Netflix movie and he got nominated for an Academy Award for it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's disappearing. And there is a little difference between doing a movie that's 2 hours versus doing something like this that's 8 or 10 episodes. But my whole point with saying that about Anthony Mackie is I think they are doing something clever here with this show, in that if they do that and the show continues to raise its profile, you could see the actor getting better every season. Like, you could see someone like an Adam Driver showing up for a season, or a whoever else. Like, I could kind of see that if the show keeps raising its profile.
It's the one that I now think of as like the definitional, like, there's no more stepping down to go do a TV show like this. And granted, maybe HBO is considered more highbrow than Netflix, but when Anthony Hopkins did Westworld.
Right. Yeah.
So here's a question. Maybe this could be well, actually, do we have more feedback?
Oh, we do. We have a couple things.
Okay.
He says, speaking of games, I think Cyberpunk is going to be as close to Altered Carbon as we get right now. I guess Cyberpunk is a game.
Cyberpunk is, and the Shadowrun world, which I mentioned before, which is another Cyberpunk world. So I think he's straight on like that.
He says, I definitely think Falconer is going to be the lead in season 3. I feel like the end of season 2 is set up for that. I definitely think so that it did that, but then with the showing up of Kovac Prime Stack, I think he might show up again. I think what'll probably, if I had to guess, we'll get an episode that's about Kelker's Falconer, and then at the end of that first or second episode, Kovac shows up in a new body, or surprises us with having been in a body the whole time, or something like that, and we get to see Kovac again. And he says, I did mean Falconer's original body, human body. And then he says, Falconer has to be way more than 300 years old. We really don't know much about her if you think about it. Like, what's her origin story? We don't know how old. I don't think stacks have been around much longer than 300 years. The only meth, we've never heard of a meth that got into the 400s. So... I don't know if we got an actual age on Harlan.
I thought Bancroft said he was like 500 years old.
He was 300 and something.
Okay.
I don't know if we got an age for Harlan or when Harlan's world was established.
I'm doing a quick search. I'm wondering if Altered Carbon timeline exists anywhere.
Right.
But but keep talking.
But I think I'm not sure. But I don't think they've been. When they talked about Bancroft in the first season, he was in the 300s, and they said. He was alive for when the envoys were around, and they say that he's a meth. He's one of these people that's like lived the longest or close to the longest. And so we talked about it in the first season. We think that around 300 to 400 years ago was when the stack technology was invented, but we're not. We don't know that yet. But it seems that the oldest people we've met so far are 300-ish or 300 to 400-ish.
So according to this is coming from Screen Rant, and they claim to have done like some really deep dive into the timeline. The Battle of Stronghold was in 2130.
Interesting.
Kovac
Interesting that they actually have like actual years.
Yeah. Kovac is spun back up in 2384, and then this season takes place in 2414. I have no idea where they're getting those numbers from. I wonder if there was like little like Easter eggs of like years on something on the screens at some point.
Yeah, that's cool. So all those numbers are the ones we know, and we were just talking about. So like that's around the 300-year timeline we know for Kovac. But we still don't know how long before Kovac. But if it's 21 something, we know it can't be more than 500 years, because that would get into our current timeline.
Right, yeah. According to this, in the late 21st century is when Harlan and the other founders arrive on Harlan's world.
The late 21st century. So that's this century. So the late 2000s.
Which seems like apparently there's going to be a couple of huge technology jumps in the next 30 to 40 years, according to this. But, who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
Possible.
I mean, the technology has increased a lot in the last 10 or so. What were you going to say? You had something after feedback. Thanks for writing in sick with it. You have very much participated in today's show. Appreciate it. That was a lot of good thoughts.
Great ideas, great questions. Really appreciated it. What was the thing I was going to throw in? Oh yeah, so I was going to ask you. Maybe it's a good way to kind of wrap up. So if we are resleeving, who would you most want to see play Kovac in season 3?
Good question. My mind immediately jumps to Marvel people because I'm such a Marvel guy, but I'm gonna try to break that and think of just who's a really great actor It's really fun to watch. Oh man. Are we trying to cast Kel, or are we trying to cast
I think we
Kovacs?
might get Kel as the same. I think we're just going with the idea, and I have mine, but I want to see if you have one.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, we're going with who would it be in the in if there's a reboot to season 3.
Yeah, man. That is a hard question because you want it to be someone young and virile because that's like matches the world. I feel like, but you want it to be a really great actor. Uh, ooh, sorry. Go with yours. Let me think on it a minute.
So there's two that I'm coming up with, and they are both from the Marvel world because that's probably the world I know best. I'm sure I could come up with others, and I'm going for that kind of like gritty but with a heart. Um, and this is maybe kind of like wanting to go back a little bit more to who the original Kovacs was, but with all of it. And the two that I'm coming up with are Michael B. Jordan and
Ooh, yes.
let me make sure I'm getting this guy's name right. Jon Bernthal.
Ooh, good
And for
ones.
people
Yeah.
who know that Michael B. Jordan he's played a number of things, and so he has played in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He was Killmonger, but I've known him, thought about him for much longer. He was as a child actor, he was on The Wire, and he was fantastic in that. He was in Creed. He's
Fruitvale
been in
Station.
a number of things where he's been very, very good. And Jon Bernthal has been in The Walking Dead, but especially in what he played the Punisher, Frank Castle.
It's funny. I thought of a Walking Dead actor too. I was thinking possibly Rick Grimes would be an interesting Kovacs. What's his actual name? It's funny. I tried to go outside of Marvel. I don't know why I did that because I think it's my habit because on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, people are always asking us who we'd cast, and I'm always like, well, I have to step outside of Marvel. But I don't know why I did that here. This was finally my chance to use a Marvel actor in a casting question, and I didn't do it.
Actually, you know who else I'd love to see him play? And maybe just because I want to just see this actor get more screen time in general, but I also think he could be, for this kind of role, I think he'd be so good. Idris Elba.
Oh yeah, Idris Elba would be so good.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. So anyone else you came up with?
No, I mean
Idris Elba, by the way, I can claim because yes, he's been in the MCU, but he is very. But I don't think anyone's ever going to associate the MCU as like the first thing they tie to Idris Elba.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Simon Pegg.
Who is he?
He's the guy from Shaun of the Dead.
Oh, okay.
Played Scotty in the Star Trek movies. Sorry, I just thought that would be funny. Like I could absolutely see that kind of. Like I could see what if they cast like someone who's a little goofier or comedic in this role, and then like he's still the badass, but we saw him play that singer in the first episode, and to me that showed a little bit of range to the character that we haven't seen. Like he has this sort of artistic side that like
it could be a woman.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It could be like the actress who plays I think it's Brie Larson is the actress who plays Captain America.
Captain Marvel.
Captain Marvel.
I'd rather see someone like I guess I talked a lot negatively about Captain Marvel a lot last night, so I'm not want to do it. But
okay.
before Captain Marvel, I would want the Scarlet Witch, the character lady who plays Scarlet Witch, would be a really fun one for me.
Oh, I don't think she's that good an actress, actually.
Really? I love her. I love her from other stuff.
I'll have to listen to your MCU episode and probably send in some feedback because I think Captain Marvel is one of the absolute best of the MCU movies.
Interesting. I don't feel that way at all.
Yeah. I think her character arc it's subtle and it's one that many guys can't relate to, so you have to kind of look for it. But I think I think she has maybe the best character arc of any character we've seen, except maybe Tony Stark.
Yeah, please send in that feedback because I mean, we've talked about it a lot before on the cast, but I don't feel that way. I feel I don't hate that movie, but I think they do something very experimental with it. They do something that is, I don't think we get a sense of her character because she doesn't know who she is. And I think like they're doing this thing where they're trying to like establish the character by having her realize who she is. And that's sort of the end of the movie. So I don't feel like in that movie or in Endgame particularly, we really get to know Carol Danvers. Like she's snarky, and that's about, for me, that's the character. I feel
like that journey of self-discovery is one that so many, especially women, but I think a lot of people can really relate to as a actual like that there is really an arc there, and that we do get to see a lot. Anyway, that's a different podcast, so I'll be sure to respond to you on that one. But I think that actress could be a really good choice. I will also say, as we're discussing actors, like I love the fact that we can just bounce around this and not that we can kind of cast an actor of any race, any gender, and that's kind of one of the fun things about the show. Especially because one thing I by the end of the season, we had a group of 4 characters of color who are like our main group, and most of the show has been primarily our heroes have all been people of color, mostly black folk, and I was like, I'm struck by how much I'm not being struck by that, but it is a really nice thing to see, a sci-fi world where it's not just like there's a token, 1 or 2 black characters or characters of color. But I think we talked about this in season 1. We were like, yeah, this is kind of awesome that there's so much richness to it. And this season they were able to just like I don't even think the directors and writers were like, let's get a number of actors of color in. I think they got to a point where they wanted to cast each of these characters and thought, who's the best actor we can find, and they all wound up being black actors. And I think that's the Luke Cage, and I'm saying all this as a white person who obviously has a very not the main perspective on this, and so that's part of why I haven't commented much on it in general.
Right.
But it is just like I think a really nice thing that you can have both the shows where the blackness of the characters is a very important thing, and that's an important thing that they all be cast properly because of that. But also one like this where it's like the race of the character, because we're in kind of a transhumanist world where race doesn't really matter much. The actor can be played by anyone, and that means it doesn't have to be the default is white.
Yeah.
So there were just a lot of moments where I was just struck by like, oh, I'm seeing 3 black characters on screen arguing or having a conversation. I really like it.
I had that moment it was like episode 6 or 7 when they're heading out to try to find the Kellist Rebellion. And I was struck with that, and I like yourself, I was a little hesitant to mention it because I'm not a black guy, and I don't want to like act like I don't know. I don't want to talk about their struggle or whatever in any exploitative way. But yeah, I definitely noted it, and what I noted was that I hadn't noticed it until now, and like I noticed Trep, Falconer, and Kovac are going through a tunnel together, and I looked up and I was like, those are our 3 main characters of this show right now. Those are the ones that they're focusing the main part of the story on, and they're all 3 black characters, and that is very cool. And it's cool that it didn't feel like in any way forced or in any way like I was watching a black show. It was just very 3-dimensional characters, not being not feeling like any type of stereotype.
Right. I think when you say a black show, what you're talking about is like when the things we often get where it's white writers and directors putting together what they think of as like, what a black comedy show or something should be.
Sure, and it's not always white people writing it. It's sometimes it's black people writing it, but it's I guess like it's stuck in our culture right now, and I like that this is so removed from our culture that allows me to see the 6 characters differently.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to make sure, like, for you, something like a Luke Cage is not part of what you're talking about there.
Well, I mean, it is and it isn't. I think that show does a good job of it, but it is still, it is very much in that culture. And there's nothing wrong with that, and I love that show. But it is, the blackness is so, in an indelible part of the show. In this, it's so not, and I loved that we get to that place where there's 3 complex black characters on screen, and I haven't thought about their race at all until that moment. I was like, oh wow, that's neat. I like that the show has done that. By the way, Sick With It over on Facebook says, it's cool, I'm a black guy, it's fine.
Okay, well, we have one black person approving, so everything you say is fine. No, that's not how it works, but thank you for the feedback. And I'm going to be curious to go find stuff about this show written by authors of color talking about it, because I wonder like how it's perceived. Because I like I said before, I think there's a real need for both. I think it's great to have the shows like Black Lightning and Luke Cage, where it's like, yeah, it's about the experience of blackness in this world, in these kind of science fiction-y worlds. But also you can have a show like this where it's not about race. The whole point of the world is that they're kind of transhumanist. But that that therefore that doesn't mean because let me say it this way, we're getting out of a world where it says that because the race of the character doesn't matter, therefore they should all be played by white people. And so that I really like and appreciate.
Yes.
I
agree.
I think because you and I should probably not try to fix racism in media. That's about we should probably wrap up the conversation.
Yeah,
Do you have any other kind of last things about this episode you wanted to say?
We both are so scared to say something too overfraught, and we're both like, I don't know how to exactly. But also, it's nice to just say, I like to see the representation and diversity in the show. And actually, Sick With It said the same thing. He said, I honestly never paid attention to how many black people are on the show. I did notice the diversity, and that's awesome. So yeah, totally agree. So that's a good last word. You had something you wanted to tell us about.
Yeah. So, and this is just we're now getting to a major digression here, and I get that. I don't want to ever actually, I'm gonna pause this 1 second.
Okay.
I need to actually have the link that I can read into. I want to be able to read the URL.
Hope your live stream folks are doing well. We just
sorry for that.
this is the kind of thing we edit out when it's a podcast.
This is the kind of you get to see how the sausage is made moment.
Sometimes we have to look for links and things.
One more click. Okay, let me start that again. Yeah, thanks, Matt. This is obviously going to be a big divergence. Yeah, thanks, Matt. This is actually going to be a big divergence from our normal topic, but we did talk earlier about the nonprofit world, and I want to just kind of use this platform to talk about this for 1 second. I do work in the nonprofit world, and I work for an organization called Code Savvy. It's a group I'm really proud of. They do basically they try to bring computer science, computer programming, phone app building, like teaching those skills to kids, and especially to kids who are often not included in computer science conversations. Young girls, kids of color, low-income kids. The kind of kids who often don't see themselves as like, oh yeah, I could be a computer scientist too. More recently, our organization has really kind of reacted a lot to the COVID world, and we've been putting out a lot of videos to help distance learning and to bring computer science learning to kids who are at home, and to have both teach them and teach their parents, let there be a conversation the two of them are talking about. And I'm saying this all because, and I will promise to only do this kind of thing once a year, but our organization is launching a big fundraiser right now. And for anybody who thinks like that these kind of things sound great, and you'd be interested in either just like taking a look at it and reading about it, or maybe throwing a couple of bucks our way, it's something I'd really love and would really appreciate. And so I'll try to put a link to that in, I guess we don't have show notes, but I'll send a link to you that can be included somewhere. Maybe I'll post it on the, I'll post it actually on the Stranded Panda Podcast Network.
Actually, if you send it to me, I think I can make it clickable in the notes of the actual podcast for most people, so they can find it easy. Okay. And we can put it on strandedpanda.com. Yeah.
But just for the URL I can give to anybody, it's just www.givemn, the word give, and then the letters mn.org, /story, /WestFox, my last name, WestFox Code Savvy. And that's all one word. So it's a lot. Again, link will be in a couple different places. Please don't feel any pressure to do it whatsoever. But if you want to just kind of check out what we're doing because you think it sounds great, if you have kids of your own or who are part of your family or part of your friend network that you think would be interested in learning about computer science, please, we make it for Minnesota, but it's all over the world. People can learn from these videos, and be happy to have you download them and check them out. And if you think it's doing good work and you want to throw a couple bucks our way, that would really be wonderful. So Matt, thank you for giving us this platform, and to all of you, thank you for listening to that, and just thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Matt and you and I started talking about podcasting because we liked these kind of discussions and the moral discussions and the plot discussions. And Binges Assemble has been a great place because this show has just been so rich for bringing up those kind of issues. And I love that, like, even just stuff like nonprofit work, that ties into what we talked about. It's a great testament to what the show has been about.
Absolutely. This show is exactly the kind of show we're looking for to talk about, and I'm really glad we got to do it because it didn't fit into a lot of the shows we do already on the network. So we're looking actually at spinning this off into a show that will be a good home for this, because this was not the original intent of Bingers Assemble, but it was good. It was a good little thing we could do during quarantine. I think we stole the sleeve of this podcast. Yeah. We inserted our stacks into this sleeve, and it was fun. It was fun while it lasted. And we may when we come back in a couple weeks with we're gonna next week we are gonna cover the Altered Carbon movie, animated movie, and then I think we're gonna take a week off, and then if we can, we'll come back with the Boys Watch sometime soon, and that might be on its own feed, on a new feed. We're gonna look into it and see about launching something. We're working on a name and all that kind of stuff. Jeff has a name he really likes. We'll talk about it after the cast.
Nice.
Anyway, guys, we'll be back soon. Thank you very much.
Good.
Peace.
Keep the poetry alive.
Nice. Bye, live stream.